Hi, good morning. Welcome to Edelman on a beautiful day here in New York. Thank you to everyone who could join us here at this event in person and for everyone watching online. This is the first of a series of fascinating conversations and dialogues we'll be convening with business leaders and communicators around innovative technology in business and financial services over the next couple months. Um, in thinking about this topic today, I was reminded of Herb Kelleher, the co-founder and longtime CEO of Southwest Airlines. At one point, he was asked if he even had a business strategy, and his response famously was, "Of course, he had a business strategy. It's called doing things." And I think for a lot of business leaders over the past couple months, business strategy in a post-Chat GPT world has felt like that. It's felt like the pressure to do things, to do AI everywhere, and to do it yesterday. And that's really important. We all feel those pressures. We're all getting smart at the same time. But I think that masks a few really important ideas. The first is that there are many people, business leaders, academics, researchers that have been working on these technologies, on AI, in business, in financial services, in many cases for decades. And this conversation and a lot of the work that we'll all be doing for years to come is really going to be built on the foundation that they laid. The second thing to keep in mind is that the pace of innovation is going to be sporadic. It's going to be slow at times, it's going to be quick, and then it's going to be slow again. And I think we all need to be mindful to take that long view of technology and innovation and implementation in our work and in our businesses, but recognize that innovation is headed towards something new. And third, it's vitally important that that as we do this, we are mindful of implementing and integrating and considering these technologies in a responsible way. ChatGPT really captured the world's attention. Anytime the world's attention is captured, the world changes. And we need to make sure that what we do, what we think about, what we talk about is ensuring that that innovation and that new thing is used for good and for the benefit of society. So our hope today is to convene this conversation with smart people who are already well down this path of exploration and implementation and discovery around AI technology in business and financial services, so that we can learn from them, collaborate with them, and really spark our collective imagination around what's possible in our daily lives for society and for the stakeholders that we all work for. So to that end, I'm excited about what the next 90 minutes or so have in store. I want to invite our moderator for the day up to the front, Mike Allen, the co-founder of Axios.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Absolutely, welcome. And then our two speakers for session one, Ather Williams the third from Wells Fargo, and Alberto Rossi from Georgetown University McDonough School of Business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Lex, and all your colleagues at Edelman Smithfield who've made these conversations possible. I love Chris's point about people who are down the path. We're very privileged to have people today here who are early adopters, early thinkers, who are going to help us all find the way. Just this weekend, Easter weekend, I was back in Portland, Oregon, playing Uncle Mike, and my siblings around the table with their kids who are in high school and college, they were talking about just how much the AI world had changed from Christmas, where Tate, one of my nephews, was saying that he was using ChatGPT for a project. He had to promote milk, and ChatGPT helped him come up with milk gets you moving. And that was a curiosity. Now at Easter, everybody around the table is using AI. So our first guest, Ather Williams, who's part of the Wells Fargo senior leadership team, senior EVP and head of strategy, digital innovation, enterprise payments. And we were just practicing this at the table. Alberto Rossi. How'd I do? Now you do it.
Alberto Rossi.
Okay. Georgetown professor of finance, director of AI analytics, director of the AI Analytics and Future of Work initiative, and so was way ahead of everybody at Georgetown's McDonough School of Business. Ether, you talk about AI as a human answer more than a human replacement. Do tell.
So we've all seen that image of sort of the evolution of humans. You start as a primate, it moves up to an upright walking person. The next evolution of that path is really a person with an AI, think about on their shoulder, making that person bionic, if you want to go back to the $6 Million Man reference of my childhood. So when we think about how AI can be used in banking, so obviously I work in financial services, we work for companies, we work for individuals. Technology is not new. So technology's evolved banking pretty aggressively. If you think about how it started out being very personal, like when I was a kid, you went into the branch and you talked to a person and they knew you, they knew your family, they knew about your history, they knew what you wanted. And then you had, other products and instances. You had like credit cards. Before credit cards, you actually knew the merchant, and the merchant would extend you credit based on your relationship. Then credit cards came in and took that all and centralized it. ATMs took you from going into the branch to pulling cash out of a machine. And then internet banking hit in the 90s, where you could do a lot of your transactions remotely. So it took banking from being very personal to being very product centralized. AI is going to bring us back to the area where we can now personalize at scale. So we can know you. We can customize your experience, whether it's you show up in a branch, we know how you want to be, what your relationship is, how do you want to talk to us. Or it's a combination experience where it's digital and virtual, digital and physical, because we can bring a person into a session. Those things weren't possible, 2-3 years ago. We also can overlay on that a lot different level of protection. So when I think about some of the things that are live today, just think about how fraud was done or fraud detection. It used to be pretty basic patterns of, you had 2 purchases in New Jersey, now you purchased something in Brooklyn, that's fraud. But now that everything's mostly moved to e-commerce, your world looks very different. You could be buying something in multiple countries inside minutes. And so how do we really understand the network, the connections that AI enables us to make behind the scenes that vastly improves our ability to do things?
Now, Ather, Wells Fargo recently rolled out LifeSync. Tell us about LifeSync.
Yeah, so LifeSync is in our wealth management area. And really what we're trying to do is help people manage their financial goals. And so it is a capability to allow people to say, this is what I'm trying to do, short-term or long-term, and connect it to their advisor. So their advisor knows in real time what they're thinking about, what they're trying to do, whether it's save for a vacation or plan for retirement, and everything in between. Connecting them to an advisor to do that, and then we can be much more in tune with what you want to do. Now you layer on top of that, we also launched our new AI chatbot, Fargo, which is powered, it's a partnership with Google, so it's powered by their NLP engine. And
Wait, the chatbot is named Fargo.
Named Fargo.
So good. And what's
very creative. I'm not the marketing person.
What's Fargo's personality?
Well, Fargo, I would say the personality is, right now, Fargo is, your servant, your assistant. And so Fargo is very much trying to help you navigate just basic tasks in your financial life. But that's Fargo 1.0. Fargo 2.0 is going to take that information from things like LifeSync, what we know about your environment, and actually not only customize your experience, but also so be less of a concierge, more of an advisor. So thinking about, hey, you said you want to, you're trying to pay down debt. Well, we analyze your financials, your spending. Here are some places you could cut and save. Or, we have these subscriptions coming due, the prices have gone up. Do you want to change those things? Be much more proactive part of your life to scan your financial ecosystem, because most people don't have the time or spend the energy to do that.
Professor Rossi, you popularized or coined a term that caught my eye, Roboadvisor.
So this is something that is in the industry, has been around for a while now. Roboadvisors, one of the kind of the way we think about robo advising is any kind of tool that provides algorithmic advice to individuals that is catered and tailored to the individual's characteristics. And I think that most importantly, one of the things that I think is crucial about robo advising is the implementability. In many cases, the crucial thing is that the implementation of the advice should be very simple, right? We know there's a lot of research showing that you can give very good advice to individuals on what to do, but if you don't help them out, if you don't carry their hand into the implementation of the kind of the actual steps of implementing the advice, they will simply not do it. And I think I think that robo-advisors usually people think about robo-advisors as all those tools that help individuals making better investment decisions. So when I talk about robo-advice, people think about Betterment or Wealthfront and those kind of automated portfolio allocation tool. But I think people should start thinking about the fact that automation is taking place across the spectrum, right? If you think about individuals' household balance sheet, you can think about individuals as a firm. People are going to have assets. They're going to be financial assets. They're going to have also real assets. They're going to have a house. They're going to have a car. They're going to have the human capital, and they're going to have liabilities. Those liabilities can be the mortgage they take, the kind of more credit card that they take, and automation can allow us to really help them make better decisions across the board. Before, you used to have that your financial advisors was the one helping you making those decisions. Of course, this means that a lot of people were cut out of the financial advice simply because they didn't have enough wealth to be catered for. And now instead with automation, we can cater to all those people and effectively kind of allow to incorporate many more part of the populations into financial advisory services.
And what are some of the services that you imagine being totally automated, and what do you see as forever hybrid?
I mean, that's a kind of one of the kind of major kind of trade-off that financial services companies have been dealing with is exactly how much hybrid component to have in the services, right? So you can have that if you're thinking about like going to a new restaurant, that's a pretty low cost decision. You're going to be very happy to have Open Table recommend you a new restaurant. That's going to be something that historically or 20 years ago a concierge would do. Now you're going to be very comfortable with being fully automated. And of course, on the other end, you have telehealth. You have automated healthcare that is potentially difficult for people to accept now, right? Financial services are a little bit in between in the sense that you tend to have that individuals that accumulate a lot of wealth, they're going to be pretty concerned by kind of dealing only with a true algorithm. So you're going to have that depending on the type of individuals and the level of wealth they have, you're going to have that the degree of automation is going to differ.
There's something I'm going to ask every one of our guests today, and you get to be first, is to blow my mind. Tell me something exciting that's coming. And when you and I were chatting on the phone after Kate brought us together, you gave an example of what could happen with personalizing a loan. And that stuck in my mind.
Yeah, well, so I think it relates to what Alberto just said. If you think about it from a decision-making process, right? So we think about AI as I mentioned earlier, augmenting human decisions. And so the consequences matter of how you think about whether or not you can totally trust the model or do something individual. And so a loan is one of those things that's, can be very impactful. The average small business has 21 days of cash. And so access to capital in a timely manner is critical. AI can speed that process along, but you also want to make sure you understand what's going on in the model so you don't auto-decline people that you should be approving. And so how do you create that hybrid experience where there's a human in the loop to make that final decision, to add that empathy, to add a different angle that you may not normally see? The thing that when we think about, though, is that loan transaction is a bilateral conversation. It's the client and us, and that's traditionally how banking's worked. It's you and your client. But when you really think about it, if we all think about our financial lives, our personal lives, it's an ecosystem. It's not just you. It's I've got my children, I've got my home, I have my wife, I have my parents, I have my siblings, I've got communities I support, charities I support. That's all my ecosystem. What AI can help us do is actually help you manage that ecosystem and think about it in a very different way about how you use your money and how your money works for you or against you in some cases in that ecosystem. That's a very different way to think about how banking works, but in reality, that's how your life works. And so whether it's, sources and uses of cash and how you manage that, that's where AI can do that, because it can make connections. You know, when you think about some of the basic models of AI, it's around neural networks, so deep learning. Your financial life is very much like a neural network. There's all these nodes that connect that you may not even understand the connection points to, and you need to apply them.
Now, we've probably all experienced it at perhaps a different stage in our life, but what were you referring to when you talked about your money working against you?
Oh, well, I mean, I think there's, look, we can all talk about the phenomenon of cryptocurrency of the last couple of years, and people got swept up in the hype of it.
Chris was a huge crypto guy.
Hopefully not anymore. But I think that's a case where people were like, oh, you know, you could see the volatility, and people are making, you know, astronomical amounts of money. But given your risk profile and where, you know, how much money you have to put at risk, you don't always make the smartest decision. And I think the knowledge you can bring across a broad set of people, because you only hear about in the media the ones who made a lot of money, right? You don't hear about the people on the other side of that trade. And so that's where we can help.
So blow my mind. Part two, we've been talking a little bit about consumers, but now looking at your business clients. Something you mentioned is insights about foot traffic. What do you imagine being able to do down the road, or maybe is being done today?
Well, I think part of that ecosystem mentality for a bank is, I think about it, we're one of the largest commercial real estate lenders in the country, right? And so we've got everything from large companies who develop properties like Hudson Yards, where our headquarters are in New York, or to multi-tenant landlords. And so you can think about the whole spectrum. We also have, you know, across our 70 million customers, we have 44 million debit card holders. We've got, you know, tens of millions of credit card holders. They're all interacting and spending. And so if we look at where they are and what they're doing, think about connecting, oh, you're a small business owner, you want to open a shop. Where should I do that? Well, we can actually tell you who's buying what, where, on what block, and what time of day. We have that information. We also know what rents are, because we bank most of the landlords. And so our ability to provide real intelligence to the question you're trying to ask and aggregate that, which is not traditional financial advice, but it's information we have because of our position in the economy, it's critical. And that's, I think, where we can make a difference.
And so you've had this information for a long time. AI is going to help surface it, or just tell us a little bit about that journey?
Well, I think the surfacing of it is more of a data science problem of actually unlocking the data from its underlying applications and getting it into a place where we
That's
can
the
deal
word,
with it.
unlocking.
Yes. What AI is going to do is allow us to make connections across that data we normally wouldn't see. A human being would normally program like a machine learning algorithm to sort of say, well, look for these things and find this pattern. But we want to know the patterns we don't normally see. That's where AI is going to continually evolve and make us smarter. We just have to make sure we understand, and we were having this conversation beforehand about the black box nature of it, make sure we understand that connection and why, because being in a regulated industry, that's of utmost importance to us, because the decisions our customers make about their money are really impactful for their lives, and we have a role in that, and so we want to make sure we're very careful about it.
Professor Rossi, something you've thought, wrote, studied, talked a lot about is financial inclusion. And that actually is an encouraging sign, even for jobs. Tell us about how financial inclusiveness can actually help humans.
Yeah, so I think that one of the biggest concerns that people have whenever they think about automation is like, oh my God, the algo is going to take away my job, right? So I'm going to be out of a job. But one thing that I think we're discovering a little bit is the fact that exactly because automation is able to lower the cost of providing services, what is happening is that in many cases, some markets are expanding dramatically, right? So let's go back to the financial advisory example of before. You used to have that people, if you didn't have enough wealth or assets under management, you were something that was not an interesting client for human financial advisors because you were not worth their time. Now, of course, what is happening is that through automation, companies are able to deliver financial advisory services to more and more a larger fraction of the population, which means that the role of the financial advisor is changing. Now you have that the financial advisor may not have to do the portfolio allocation for the clients, may have to cater to their needs, but you also have that the market is expanding. So if anything, you actually have that the demand for human financial advisor is expanding in many areas compared to contracting. So I think that there is always this kind of unintended consequences and kind of unintuitive effects of innovation and automation that can be kind of a very good, it can give us like a very bright kind of hopes for the future.
And Professor Rossi, this next topic is going to hit very close to home for every single person in this room and everyone who's watching around the world. And that is one of the biggest barriers to adoption of AI is trust. How do we help rebuild, regain, bolster trust in these systems?
Yeah, so I think that, I mean, if you look at any survey, you'll see that one of the major kind of barriers to adoption, if trust, I mean, this is people historically have not trusted having algorithm managing their money or having interacting with a bot. But I think that it's all kind of coming to us. ChatGPT is really changing how, or like this large language models, generative AI is really changing the way we can interact with some of these tools. You have that a lot of these chatbots are now kind of interacting with us in a very kind of natural way, which is scary on the one hand, and also on the other hand, it kind of creates a huge opportunity. So I think that historically, a lot of financial advisory or financial services companies were adopting this hybrid structure where you used to have that the human would complement the algorithm, would come into play exactly when the individual was facing needs. And now a lot of companies are experimenting and see how can we kind of devolve some of this queries, some of these issues that the customers have. How can we resolve them with an automated chatbot instead?
Either across our conversations this morning, we're going to be hitting on 4 big buckets, all of which are part of your empire: the consumer experience, the competitive landscape, responsible AI, and then the 4th, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how Wells Fargo thinks about equity and ethics and AI.
Ooh. So let's take those 2 separately. So when I think about ethics, there's really 2 dimensions that we're primarily thinking about. One is, obviously, we're a large employer. And so we think about the places where we can automate, which we know is going to displace people. But then there's the conversation about, okay, how can we upskill and retrain those people? Because as we already talked about, there's a great demand still for hybrid and personal experiences. And so our ability to train people to go out and actually continue to help in their communities or help people personally around their financial advice is great. But we need to be able to replace the low value work and redeploy those people to other things. We also then can make those people better and smarter by leveraging that same technology. Now, on the other dimension we're thinking about around ethics and AI is obviously understanding the outcomes. And so whether it's in a credit decision or making an investment advisory recommendation or making a recommendation to a customer about how to better manage their working capital in their small business, all those things have, can have, meaningful financial consequences. So thinking about how we really understand how we got there and the source of the data is really, really critical.
And when we think about equity in AI, what's the danger? What's the opportunity?
So what do you mean by equity?
What are your concerns about how people could wind up being included or excluded by AI?
Well, that's gonna be a very that's a slippery slope. So I think first and foremost, it gets back to understanding the outcome of the model, right? Because you don't want to have, humans by nature are biased, and humans are programming the AI, and so oftentimes they can introduce that bias into the model. So we need to understand all that to make sure that we're not making adverse selection that we don't want to do. The other side of it, I do have this concern, like as a parent of 3 young adults, I think about what the jobs of the future are going to look like, and which are there, there'll be soon based on ChatGPT where you have a job as actually being a prompt engineer. How do I talk to the AI? And then there's someone programming the AI, and everyone else in between is sort of out of the loop. And so making sure that we've got, from a generational perspective, the right education for people, and whether that's going to happen in the broader educational system or at universities like Georgetown, or candidly, we're going to have to do it internally as part of our training programs to bring our employees into the next generation of what's going to happen. That's sort of the place where our learning development teams are spending a lot of time thinking about, here's the implication, here's the downside, here's the possibilities. How do we, as a responsible company who are helping people with their financial lives, our employees as well as our clients, do that responsibly?
Very helpful, thank you. So at Axios, we finish each of our newsletters, each of our events with one fun thing to remind us that our experts are humans. Professor Rossi, I asked him his out of work passions, and he said CrossFit, running, restaurants. So a twist for you of those three passions, which either uses AI or should or could?
Well, I think that now the world of fitness is being revolutionized with the introduction of technology. And you actually, one typical example is that, we all have Apple Watches. One, I think, a very interesting kind of company that was coming up was Whoop, was a couple of years ago, that not only was tracking your fitness level and whatever, but was also giving you recommendations on the basis of how much rest you took and so on and so forth. So it would say, okay, this is the day you want to push on your workout exactly because you had a very good rest day and the day before. And instead, when you have overloaded, you should go light exactly to maximize peak performance. So I think that before you used to have that a training coach was what you needed to have kind of to train for a marathon. Now you can do it pretty easily in an automated way.
So leg day gets a little bit more complicated. And Aether, you're a big scuba diver, including in the Red Sea. Tell us how you got into scuba and what we could learn from it.
So how I got into scuba, so my parents didn't swim. My sister doesn't swim. And so at a young age, I just probably because I didn't. I wanted to learn to swim. I ended up loving the water. And so when I first moved to New York back in the early 90s after college, I took a class at the 92nd Street Y and got certified to dive, then went down to the Caribbean and started diving. Been diving ever since for almost now 30 years. My 19-year-old daughter is my dive buddy. So Phoebe's my dive buddy. We're both certified rescue divers. So I think my retirement plan is to sort of go down in the Caribbean and own a dive shop and sort of, hang out by the waves and listen to Jimmy Buffett.
And real quick, your most exotic spot so far and your bucket list spot.
So my most exotic spot so far has been the Maldives. So I was able to do a 10-day liveaboard cruising through the atolls, diving 4 or 5 times a day, saw whale sharks and some amazing things. My bucket list spot would probably be like some parts of Southeast Asia, like Bali, or some place I haven't been yet. But I've had the good fortune because I travel so much for work to sort of tack on a couple extra days and either be in the Red Sea or the Great Barrier Reef or the Blue Hole. So diving is great. And so the AI component. So my most recent dive trip, I actually dove with my Apple Watch. Having spent my entire career diving with mostly analog computers or using gauges and writing notes in books, and then actually getting to an Apple Watch that could tell me real time my depth, my oxygen consumption, and then giving my air mix actually really much more accurate about my bottom time and sort of decompression limits it was eye-opening. It was really eye-opening with the potential for what it could do for my dives.
Here's to the Margaritaville's surf shop, dive shop. Thank you very much. Great conversation, Alberto, Aether, Alberto. Thanks for great conversations. Come on up, Alexandra and Aaron. Alexandra, welcome. Alexandra, Alexandra, my visa day. How'd I do?
Pretty.
So we had a little. Alexandra had the best mnemonic. She said, use my visa day and put an M in front of it. So, but do it right.
Musa Visa Day.
Alexandra, Musa Visa Day.
That's perfect.
And that makes Aaron Spool. I don't need quite as much help with that. So, Alexander is CEO and co-founder of Evident, a research company specializing in the measurement of AI adoptions. For our friends in the room, her index is right in front of you. Aaron Spool is managing partner of Aventus Advisory Group. He calls himself a CEO enabler, and he is a fellow Eagle Scout.
Yes.
Runs in the family. Very nice. So, Alexander, since we're all holding the Evident AI Index, the first edition is for banks, and it measures a very interesting term. You talk about AI maturity. Tell us about that.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, we released it just 8 weeks ago, the first public benchmark on banks on their AI maturity. Actually, we call it AI adoption, AI maturity, AI readiness. But at the end of the day, it is measuring the capabilities of the banks on all of the ecosystem that goes into being AI mature. And you ask, what is that? And that is how strong are your capabilities to deliver return on investment of your AI investment in the banks? So we break that down into looking at, we gather, we look at millions of data points, but we gather across about 150 indicators, and they fall into 4 buckets. One is talent, and we look at the whole talent stack in the bank. We look at innovation, so we look at research and patents. We look at investments and acquisitions. We look at partnerships, and which was talked about just before. We look at leadership, also an important component, looking at whether there is a commitment to make that transition and make the bank AI first, and looking at how that is communicated both internally and externally. And then we look at responsible AI. So while the engine room is, one thing in terms of talent, innovation, and leadership, we look at how it's implemented. And we assign various weights to those 4 pillars. We got higher weights on talent and innovation, leadership and responsible AI. Not that they're not important, but they're slightly lower weighted in the index. And that's what the AI, sort of the maturity index looks at across the banking system.
And Alexander, as you zoom out, as we say at Axios, what do you find about the sector? How ahead or behind banks are as you looked across all the big banks in the world?
Yeah, so we started out measuring the 23 largest banks in North America and Europe. And it is a sector that has been spending a lot of time and money. So many of the banks have started this journey 5, even 6 years ago, and some even before that, and spend in the billions every year on a digital transformation and AI transformation. And more is spent on AI. And so we see variation in North America and Europe. North America is very far ahead compared to the European banks. And interestingly, we saw some of the Canadian players coming quite high up in the index, which was interesting, and I have my theories about that. But as a sector, it has also a lot of data and very interesting use cases. So being able to actually attract some good talent into the banking sector, because it has been interesting for AI talent coming out of academia and big tech to go and try out some and work on interesting problems across the banking sector. So that's, and then the big data sets, as I mentioned. So we thought we would tackle the banking sector first, though there are other sectors that use AI heavily, which is manufacturing and retail and so on. But in the banking sector, there is also the interesting aspect that it's highly regulated. So have been thinking about the oversight of AI for a long time, and maybe more so than other sectors.
Aaron, when you and I did a Zoom or Teams or whatever relatively low-tech way we connected compared with what we're blue skying about today, you made the point that a lot of people think that this is the future, whereas so many use cases are now. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your own personal journey with your firm on that.
Sure. So I'll just give an example. I'll explain a little bit about what we do. We're on-demand CFO, controller, and accountants. So think about, I hate to use the word outsource, but that's what other people use. We're an outsourced finance department, whether for public companies or private. So the only way we can responsibly do our job is being technology focused. And there's 2 ways you do that. You do that by obviously embracing the efficiencies, but also the effectiveness. So you can imagine all the firms that we use, that we work with, and they are very, very manual. And they've been very successful so far. So I don't want to knock being manual. It's quite all right. But in order for them to get the care that they need, we have to not only provide human expertise, but also, technology expertise. So that's all buzzwords and stuff. I would say immediate uses right now of tech, besides the standard stuff that you can get off platform, payment processing and good banking software and good reporting software. One of the things that we're using now is trying to figure out how to use, actually we're using ChatGPT right now for financial statement analysis. And being able to do, dropping in various different data sets that we have, also that are publicly available, and quickly providing companies, and I call this the democratization of financial analysis. I can now get data sets pretty quickly that are either public or we pay for, and we can run, just benchmarking analysis. In fact, one of our employees just did that. And it's great. Now, is this scalable yet? I'm going to say no. We have an app for this, things like that. But we use this to enhance the quality of the work that we do and make it quicker. So now you're a firm of $1 million to $5 million in revenue, maybe up to 20. You can have deep financial statement analysis and industry analysis. Now, granted, you need a human to interpret that for you right now, but which you've never had before, never had access before. And even if you did have access to it, which technically you did, you didn't know what to do with it.
Now, Aaron, you now have a unique window into one of the big problems with AI, and that is what the AI engineers call hallucinating, what you and I would call BSing, that the chatbot is very confident in all its answers, even when it is completely wrong. So in those financial statement analyses, how much hallucinating, BSing did you find?
I call it the illusion of certainty. Feel free to use that. It's just, it sounds fancy. I don't want to say all of it, but I would say that it is making assumptions based off its own data set, and it's not a financial analyst.
Well, that's a little scary and doesn't sound particularly helpful.
It's helpful if you know what to use it for. I say it gets you 80% of the way there. So I'll give you an example. We used it for 2 weeks ago. We had a new client, e-com, said, all right, we were curious, write us a procurement policy that's standard for an e-com firm. And it spit one out, ChatGPT stopped pretty gosh darn quickly. And it was 80% of the way there. Now that last 20%, the only you have years of knowledge in order to be able to realize that where that 20% needed to be edited, but it saved us an intense amount of time. So it's all about, in my mind, use case. So if you want to talk about like the BSing factor, things like that, is how are you able to, and this is every part of your life, how are you able to be an appropriate skeptic? A doctor gives you, a doctor gives you a verdict, a diagnostic, whatever, fancy doctor term. I'm not a doctor. Do you get a second opinion? Do you know when to get a second opinion? Do you go on WebMD and suddenly, I think that's the whole thing, you go on WebMD and suddenly decide to try to self-diagnose? I think that relying on just an expert, whether human or computer, we all have to own our own, decision-making process. These are just enablers.
A quick one, Aaron, talking about the journey and specific real-world use cases. You recently refreshed a bunch of documents in your library. How long did that take? Tell me about that.
I forgot we talked about that. We have a internal document library that, surprise if you wonder why this is so good, it was the experience. We refreshed our entire document set and added new ones, which would have taken, say, 4 months to do. We did it in 2 days. And that was all because of AI. And now granted, we human edit afterwards. But yeah, I'll take that time saving.
Alexandra, hype versus reality. Tell us a little bit about the journey from a traditional business to an AI native business.
Well, right now it's we're following it with the ChatGPT and how that is being discussed in the context of the banks, and there's a lot of hype in terms of. We heard that from the previous speakers too, sort of where can you actually implement it across the bank? And there's a lot of expectation that it's going to solve a lot of problems and it's going to be addressed and used in many use cases when it comes to relationship to customers and clients, but also when it comes to, for example, serving financial advisors on the wealth management side and so on. So the hype is that there is a lot of potential in the large language models, and the ChatGPT, of course, is not there yet, to your point, as in that it gets you a certain percent. But if it's along the way and 80% is probably not enough when you're relying on it to do and come up with recommendations that have impact on people. So that is going to take a lot of time to fit large language models onto use cases in the banks, because it has to either fit on data that is the bank's own data, and then there's a whole, checking that that's being done okay. There's a lot of feedback loop and time that takes to make that work. So actually, yes, there's a lot of potential, but it's going to be really hard to do. Interestingly, I don't know how closely you followed, just after the ChatGPT release, the chat number 4, Morgan Stanley came out with an announcement saying that they were using it for their financial advisors. They had, it was very impressive, they had a partnership established almost 2 years prior to that with OpenAI and Microsoft. But it took a long time and really good content management and understanding of large language models and that partnership in order to use it internally. And even then, they're still working on refining it, and it can only be used in a certain aspect of the bank and something that doesn't touch clients yet. So just to say that there's a long way from it being released to actually being incorporated and implemented, particularly in the banking sector.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So as you said that, I was just thinking about the guardrails that were in place. So over time, guardrails will come down, including in banking. Maybe talk about that.
Well, guardrails in terms of the management of
Yeah, but basically accounting for that 20%, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's going to be, banks are heavily regulated. So they are going to be, and any other sector will have to demonstrate that data that they're using and that large language models are being deployed on is being done safely. So the output is safe and the output has no negative impact. The guardrails, interesting, we were talking earlier about the the pause letter. And so generally speaking, sort of globally, how are we going to respond to the release of large language models, not just in the banking sector, but across many sectors, is a big debate raging right now. But will those guardrails come down in terms of the banking sector is heavily regulated, and that's not going to change. Management of people's private data, that's going to maintain. So I think it is going to be, if you're incorporating large language models, you've got to reach those benchmarks when it comes to regulation.
So Alexandra, the pause letter that you just mentioned is a topic you're extremely passionate about. So we were, Alexandra and I were texting. She was in London. I was on GoGo in flight, and we started talking about the letter from Elon Musk and others suggesting a moratorium on AI research, and my text chain started to melt down. Tell us your view of that, and then I'd love to hear Aaron on the same topic.
Yeah, that was, I think you asked me a different question, and I answered this one about the...
You were all over this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is... It's an important letter. I'm not saying that the letter is a mistake. I think it raises really, really good questions, and it raises questions about...
But you think it's thoroughly impractical?
It is the cat's out of the bag. It is going to be impossible to stop research and deployment and release of ChatGPT models going forward. We're almost a month in, and no pause on the research has taken place so far, so I think that's evidence of that it's really impractical. And I think that I struggled to understand how 6 months was going to solve the problem of a global institutional regulatory response to something that's quite unknown. How it's going to be adopted industry by industry would be enough time when we know how difficult it is for regulators to respond. So that was my knee-jerk reaction. I think a good idea to think about. It certainly has brought the question about how we regulate this to the forefront of everyone's mind. And a lot of people, the Bank of England, the EU, everyone and across the US too, are thinking about how do we respond to that. That is very healthy. But within 6 months, when the cat is out of the bag, I think is a bit of a hurdle.
Aaron, what's your view of the pause letter, the moratorium, as others call it?
I think it's fear-mongering.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Sorry, I think it's highly impractical and fear-mongering.
Right.
And so we're going to pause on this. Like, one, good, was it globally? Like, is only the U.S.? Like, come on. It's not the first time I've seen someone from the tech sector do a late-night rant. I don't want to call it that. These are highly intelligent people, and there's like a lot of wisdom in
That
that.
doesn't stop them from ranting.
Fair. And there's also, I think that there's a huge. I think that right now, what we're seeing just with with AI in general, I would say, I don't want to dismiss it as parlor tricks. We're not hooking this up to our nuclear arsenal right now. We're not have Skynet right now. This is, I actually, where I sometimes don't trust government regulation a lot. The nice thing is that, especially banking regulation, we're incredibly cautious when it comes to medical and to banking and to things that actually matter, sometimes to our own innovation detriment. But thank God for that, because I am not really worried that suddenly we're going to put AI into anything that could, let's be blunt, kill us. Anything could. It's not going to be in running our water supply anytime soon. It's not going to be water salination plants going to be run by AI. Thank goodness that we have enough government, and I cannot believe I'm actually saying this. Thank God for government regulation and slow moving and gridlock in Congress. That will actually be probably our number one saving grace. Whoever thought that? It's no longer a bug. It's actually a feature in our system. But going back, I guess, but I think you're absolutely right. The intent of that is this stuff is real. This stuff is important. What should we be using this for? But we don't even know how to use technology anyway. Like, what's the appropriate use case for technology, for anything? I think that where my biggest fear for any large piece of technology that's now incredibly accessible to everybody is if you don't understand what it's doing. And there's a huge difference between decision advisory and decision assistance and decision making. But when's the last, think about it. I just remember when I was in university 100 years ago, and then the internet suddenly came available, and you couldn't use internet sources to cite material. And then over time, people had ability to do that. I use the internet when I use it. It's till this day. It's been around for quite a while, longer than me. I use it for decision advisory. I don't say, oh, what shaver should I buy, and whatever it spits out I buy. No, I still look at it stuff, but it aggregates a lot of information and helps me make decisions. But 100%, it raises a lot of questions. The only difficulty is, what questions does it actually raise? How do we process that as a society? How do we process that in business? And it's going to be a combination of the market economy, working things out, and government regs.
Aaron, everybody loves a good movie analogy. And as you look at some of the big flaws in AI, and the way it's used is one of the big concerns is a false sense of security that you get from what it spits out.
Yeah, I think that's with any expert.
And you talk about this in the form of a movie.
Oh, besides the Terminator and Skynet?
No, I was thinking more Good Morning Vietnam.
Oh. So this is going to really age me. My hair at least shows the age. But there's a scene in Good Morning Vietnam, and Robin Williams is on the air, and he has a character that he's playing, and I actually forget the character's name. There's a lot of cursing, which this is a family process here. We're not say that. He says, "What's the weather?" And the guy and the soldier that he interviews, he fakes interviews because his voice says, "You want to know the weather? Open the window." Now, he didn't say just open the window, he used other words. But I think that it is very, I use that example a lot, and you can look at anyone who knows data science as well, as does the model actually fit reality? And that's where I think is the discernment that we have as human individuals and trust your eyes, don't trust your eyes. It's the ability to understand it and put whatever facts you want to say versus this magic black box of certainty that's telling you should do X. Whether example of fitness, or whether example if the app says you should keep running but it hurts, maybe you shouldn't. Things along, and we can go into large examples, but I think people have enough discernment, and maybe my hope of humanity is that the people have enough discernment they're not going to just trust some magic black box. I could also get you just one of those little 8 balls. And we call it AI, and you can move it around. And that could be your decision-making device for all the knowledge that you know how the other one works.
So one of the great Axios newsletters that I work on, Axios Finish Line, comes in the evening. Thank you. A couple of you are nodding. It's healthy, helpful, hopeful, as opposed to everything else in your feed. And the other day, the Axios CEO, Jim Vandehei, had a piece on why everyone should play poker. And Alexandra gave up bridge for poker. Do tell what it is about poker that makes you a good business person.
I don't know if there's a link, but I hope there is.
Well, you said it requires grit for one
It
thing.
requires grit. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I started playing poker to get a seat at the table at my at home with a lot of older brothers, and I was quite a bit younger than they were, so that was my way in. So that's how I was. They taught me to play poker, and I think it, as I said, I think it requires a lot of grit
And what can you learn about someone by playing poker with them?
everything. Everything, everything you want to know about a person, you play poker with that person, and you will see their vulnerabilities, their insecurities, their way of bluffing, all of that stuff that comes in quite helpfully later on in life.
And why did you give bridge the boot?
I gave bridge the boot because, well, as you know, I'm a mathematician, so I enjoyed the bridge a lot with my grandparents, but it was not fast paced enough. So, but it's still something I will play once in a while. But yes, anyway.
Very fun. And Aaron, you're like one human fun fact. Like you are a big comic book guy, as we found out in our chat with you. But of my many choices for fun facts for you, you make excellent kosher.
Oh, smoked meat, special beef jerky, best on the market. I will happily challenge anyone to smoke off. I had to tell people, when I said I got into smoking, people gave me this horrified look. I'm like, oh, smoking meats. So anyone who wants smoked fish or smoked meats, come over to West Orange, New Jersey. Let me know.
Alexandra, Aaron, thanks for a great conversation. Great job. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great job. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for making that easy and fun. And now come on up, James, David, and Reed. We need a little walk-on music. Welcome. That's right. Does his own walk-on music. Welcome. Welcome. So James and David, are co-founders of Iris Technology. I'll let you guess which one's the scientist between the two of them. James is a veteran of the Army, served 2 tours in Iraq as an armor officer, received Purple Heart Bronze Star. Amazing service. David Stout, an investor and AI scientist, has been at this for many years, a pioneer technologist in machine learning and visual cognition. Reed Blackman is an escapee from academia. A number of our guests around the world are going to be jealous. So Reed, who is a PhD, is the author, is now the CEO and founder of Virtue, a digital ethical risk consultancy. His book, Ethical Machines, if you're in the room, is in front of us. Podcast by the same name. Thank all of you for joining us. I'm going to start with the Iris co-founders, and we'll do a little jump ball here. Make it real for us. Tell us how, at this moment, how today AI is already changing business and particularly the financial sector.
Yeah, I'll take a quick stab at that. So I think a lot of the AI that we see today had its genesis maybe around 2014, 15, 16, when David was studying at Stanford with several of the leading minds of today. And so every technology has a bit of a hype cycle. And now, to your point, since ChatGPT was released, everyone at least has some idea of what AI can do because it's really at their fingertips. And those are large language models, but AI is doing some incredible things in the real world as well, which is what we focus on a little bit. Everything from detecting damaged boxes in distribution centers to making sure that senior citizens, if there is a fall in an acute care setting, that we can have an alert to let people know when it happened, all the way to transportation and making sure that we have safety protocols in place in aviation and in rail. So AI is powering quite a bit, and as you all have heard, it's in the financial sector, certainly, and it's had a lot of advancements there because of the incredible amount of data that they've been able to process. So AI is all around us already, and I think the rate of that is just going to increase.
David, tell us a little more about what's happening right now and how Iris Technologies uses that and makes that accessible.
Yeah. So Iris Technology, a lot of our research went into making a development platform. So it's in early access right now, but this platform is all around enabling subject matter experts to build and own their own AI models. A lot of my research early was focused on, are there ways to build AI models that have less data? That way it's more auditable. There's a lot of concerns when you're training on 8 billion data points. Can you really confirm that those are accurate and they have no bias, things like that? So with web AI, we can enable a lot of our customers to have great explainability in their models, and then they own the model. That's significant. Traditional AI methods, a lot in like the SaaS space, are say, hey, we built this model, come use it. Hit our API endpoint, and we're going to learn off you. Our whole system is designed around putting that on their edge device. We built memory networks that live in that ecosystem. So we're not improving our models off of your personal information, but you get the benefits because the memory network is on your device. So really distributing that. That's exciting.
And David, when you said subject matter experts, a lot of our guests perked up their ears. If you're a subject matter expert, how should you be using this platform, this technology to own what you have?
Yeah. So AI traditionally is extremely complex, right? There's all of these parameters required to engage in that field. So typically a big paywall for one, trying to find the talent, and then people that actually are capable of owning the data. That requires a lot of dollars as well to acquire it. So what Web AI does is it enables companies to download our tool and start building products with drag and drop functionality. So it's a very visual process of what's my use case, describe it to our system, build it out visually, and deploy your product all in one place.
Reed Blackman, before we plunge in, you have such a fascinating personal story. So you talked about how in academia, philosophy was your obsession. How did you escape, and what do you do now?
So I still love philosophy. Philosophy is still, a big love of mine. I became obsessed with it when I was 18, straight through grad school, straight through being a professor for 10 years. So love it. Don't love academia. There's lots of things I don't like about that. I left it in a variety of ways. I had some experience with running some businesses, starting some businesses before. And when various things started happening in the marketplace, I had this idea for an ethics consultancy for many years. Didn't think that there was any kind of market for it. But when Cambridge Analytica happened, when Me Too happened, when Black Lives Matter happened, then I thought, oh, okay, if businesses don't get their ethical houses in order, that's going to be a real reputational problem at a minimum. And so that's when I thought, I think there's a market here. Oh, I also heard, of course, the engineers ringing alarm bells around AI. And so I left academia and I started a business.
In your book, Ethical Machines, I don't know if I mentioned that's the title, Ethical Machines, you use a term that I like. You talk about respectful AI. What do you mean by respectful AI?
There's at least two places where the issue of being respectful come up in the book. One is we're all familiar with being respectful of people's privacy, more specifically being respectful of people's data privacy. So if you think that people ought to have control over data that's about them, you think that's a sufficient or at least a necessary condition for respecting their privacies to grant them control of that, then being respectful of them entails giving them control over their data. That's one aspect. The other aspect has to do with explainability. So one big issue with AI is you often don't know why it's coming up with the outputs that it is. So it denies someone a mortgage, it approves someone for another loan, it grants someone a job interview, it denies them a job interview. And we don't always know why it's giving the outputs that it does. This is the black box model problem. But in many cases, giving an explanation to someone why they've been harmed in some way is necessary to exhibit respect for them. The example that I use in the book is if you're the person that, let's say you're married to, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, husband, wife, says, I'm leaving you, and walks out. You say, well, but why? And they just refuse to give you an explanation. Just no, and they walk out the door. That's exhibiting a certain level of disrespect. This sounds confessional. It's not. But so that's another way in which I think respecting people in certain situations, particularly ones in which you're harming them, requires giving them a certain explanation for why they're being harmed or not benefited. And that's part of the problems with AI, is that it often doesn't come with the explanations that we want.
Now, this Edelman Smithfield series is focused specifically on financial services. And as we were kibitzing in the hall out here, you said something that stuck in my mind. You said, the black boxes are getting darker. Explain.
Yes. All right. So look. So just so we're on the same page. So AI is just software that learns by example. And if you want a really fancy word for example, you use the word data. So what does a good mortgage application look like? The one that should be approved? Well, here's a bunch of examples of the ones that have been approved. Here's a bunch of data about what's been approved. I'm saying the same thing. And what it's in the business of doing is crawling through all that data and looking for mathematical relations among, potentially thousands of points. Okay, so really complicated mathematical patterns is what it's looking for in a mortgage application, a job application, whatever. The patterns are phenomenally mathematically complex. Let's just say they're 55 pages long. Let's say it's a 55-page long mathematical pattern that's identifying. We can't understand that. It's too complicated. We understand the language of math, but we don't understand a 55-page long formula. So that's the black box issue. The great thing here is that the whole reason we want to use AI, the whole power of it, is that it recognizes patterns that we're not capable of seeing. That if it didn't do that, we wouldn't need it. But it's a phenomenal pattern recognizer in ways that we're not. So you want to turn up the volume on the complexity of pattern that can appreciate, precisely because that's what you want it for. But the more that you turn up the volume on the complexity of the pattern that it can recognize, the more we turn down the volume on our ability to understand what that pattern consists in. The reason that I think black boxes are getting blacker, and they'll continue to do so, is the quantity of data being fed, and thus the number of mathematical relations among all those data points is only increasing. And then fast forward a couple of years, it's not clear how many years, 2 years, 5 years, you'll have quantum AI, which is going to look at patterns across trillions of data points, and forget about explainability, it's out the window.
Give us your quick timeline for quantum AI.
Oh, I don't know. Look, I was speaking to someone. Actually, my podcast today released an episode talking about quantum computers and when. And it's not a matter of when. So said my guest Brian Lanahan. It's already here, but it's coming in phases. And so we have a little bit now. We have quantum informed software now, even if it's not running on a quantum computer. But IBM, Google have pretty impressive plans to have very robust quantum computers in the next, 3 to 5 years. I don't know if they'll hit those milestones, but if they do, that's a big deal. Both for black box reasons, there's massive cybersecurity concerns around quantum computers and what they can do. So it's a really interesting time in quantum AI.
James, a topic you're very passionate about is data privacy. What are some of the issues there that are being underappreciated, underconsidered that you're concerned about?
Yeah, so everything that Reed is saying, I feel as though his voice is a choir in our office because we're thinking about the similar things, and it's a beautiful, beautiful voice. And what I am curious about is whether data privacy is as important to consumers as it is to us, and probably it is to you. My concern about this onslaught of AI that's happening right now is it comes off of 20 years of a business model out of Silicon Valley that was built on taking people's data, giving them a tool for free, and then selling that data in the background. I marvel sometimes that Europe seems much more concerned about data privacy than America. I thought, we fought the revolution over this type of ownership and property rights. But certainly there's a big concern over in the continent. I believe that consumers will become more concerned about data privacy once they realize how powerful these machines can be. And I think there will be a demand to say, I own my data, I own our IP. Then the question is do you trust the company that is saying that I'm taking all your data, just trust me, I'm using it for the right reason? We believe in a trustless environment. So we don't think we're going to do anything.
Trustless.
Trustless. Someone described trustless as if you stand next to a road, you trust that the car is not going to drive and hit you. But if you stand next to a rail, you know that that train is going to go right by you. And so we believe in saying, okay, we can't even see your data. You don't have to trust us. This machine, this web AI is going to operate on your machine. And so you have a guarantee of control of your data because it's not coming into our system.
Very helpful. And David, as an inventor, an AI scientist, something that you shared with me, you said AI models need to be narrow, auditable, and modular. And all that is in the service of safety, reliability. Unpack that for our guests.
Yeah. So Reed's been saying a lot of things that I totally agree with. When you think about models, they're so complex. Even scientists at OpenAI don't know why chat is responding the way it is on certain things. There's a lot of mystery in how these machines work. So adding steps in where explainability can be provided to the end user is critical. And this is what a narrow modular AI can do. So there's a few camps. Some people believe AGI will stem from monolithic, meaning we have one master model and it's going to do all these great things and it's going to resolve multimodality problems, which means any type of data format. And then there are people in the camp that we are in that believe that modular is the way to achieve AI, and building a system where these models can connect and share and essentially share federated learning. And federated learning means, Mike, you have a model, I have a model. There could be a future where people when they own their own AI, that model is making money for them, right? So in this, we're talking way down the line. But we should be able to trade and share learnings across each other. So building this ecosystem where models are modular and share information, and then are very narrow in the use case. So I have a model that can pick up cardboard boxes. That's really specific and very auditable. But if that model now can also drive a car, that inexplainability increases massively. So making sure we build models that can do these wide spectrum of tasks, but designing it in a way where there's a kill switch on aspects of it.
And David, we talked at the top about how just about everybody in this room, most of our guests are early adopters. All of our speakers, excuse me, today are early adopters, but you were super early. Tell us how you got into this field so far ahead of its time.
Yeah, it started with an extreme interest in neuroscience. So very interested in how the brain worked. Could not handle blood and guts. So ended up getting into computer science, which was a great second, right? So studying AI, it quickly became clear to me that this was the future. And what we were learning how to do was going to unlock tremendous value. And I have a note in my notebook that I was looking at on the plane that it was right before I left school. I halted my studies and I said, AI is not even SaaS. It changes strategy. It changes everything. And it was like, it's not a SaaS company. It's like a utility. AI is like electricity that's going to be plugged into these companies. It's just going to be a line on their cost. So early, there was so much attention in vision, computer vision. It was like, wow, this has so much information, and it's going to unlock all these things. And then all of a sudden, language, because it was a finite space, they were like, well, with language, we can unlock and train and really start to understand what humans understand. And there was this split in study where people were going to say, hey, language is going to unlock AGI, and some people were saying vision and robotics are going to unlock AGI. And I think the reality was for some of our founders, as we looked at it, as wow, I think all of it will, and I think they all are going to converge. And I think the real gift of being able to see around, I think the corner of AI was we got to be involved with great minds that were working on it early and showcasing, wow, this is real. And what's great and encouraging is now you can go into a room, or I can go to Thanksgiving and say, I work on AI and people know what it is, and they think it's real. For the past 8 years, it's been a bit of a myth. It's like vaporware. People would view AI as this thing that, but.
Thanksgiving this year is going to be lit.
Correct.
James, you come from a completely different world. Real quickly, what can our guests learn from your journey into David's world?
Yeah, so I left Iraq and went out west to get my MBA, and for a while, I really felt as though I was missing something, and I probably still am missing something. But I met somebody who was very rich. He had sold a company for $3 million, and this is around 2007. And I said, well, what did your company do? And he said, well, I figured out how to make these little things called emojis, and they're animated stuff that folks can trade on this thing called Facebook. And I sold it to Facebook for $3 million. And I said, I must really be terrible at business school because I don't understand how that produced any value at all. And they would talk about value creation. I said, I get that you're driving a nice car and you're rich, but what did this do for the national economy? And it was during those years where I started to realize, I said, okay, if all of the economy is going towards screens, essentially, and whether it was Google or Facebook, these are the dominant players, then all the incentive of innovation, all the resources, all the best minds are going to go towards screens. And how do we keep people on screens? Or if Mr. Zuckerberg has his way, how do we get people living in a screen? And that just didn't necessarily seem to me to be a very healthy way to live. And I got very nervous about where all of this direction was going to go. And when I met David, I realized, okay, wait a minute, this is a way that we can do research that is outside of screens. So what does it actually mean for AI to support us in the physical world? And if I were kind of to describe the difference between a large language model, is it really supports people who are able to stay at home during COVID, who are able to telecommute. What we are supporting are people who had to go to work during COVID. And so in Grand Rapids, Michigan, we're surrounded by folks who have to make sure boxes get shipped and make sure that, you know, agriculture continues to work and that people can still buy food in the supermarket and that planes are flying and trains are running. And so really being focused on, okay, how does the physical economy get supported by AI and not just the virtual economy has been a real passion for mine.
Reed, one of the topics that you consult on, speak on is what happens when your AI misbehaves?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways that AI goes sideways. I specialize in the ethical ways that it can go sideways. It can go, if you like, functionally wrong, just plainly inaccurate, not ethically bad, just inaccurate. But there's lots of ways that AI can go ethically sideways. The big three have to do with biased or discriminatory models, privacy violations, and black box models, which we already discussed. There's also loads of use case specific ethical risks. So what I'm in the business of doing is helping companies figure out how do we get our hands around this? How do we systematically identify and mitigate those risks?
And are companies ahead or behind on that? And do they usually call you too late? Are people discovering this on the back end?
They're way behind, no question about it. Not only are they way behind, but when they tackle it, they usually do it fairly poorly, to be totally frank. One reason is that they'll start off with things like an ethics statement that is meaningless. So they'll say, we're for fairness and we're for transparency, but are you going to be transparent with everyone about everything? No. Okay, so then what are you actually committing to when you tell me that you're for transparency? We're for fairness. KKK says the same thing. Right? At that high of a level, they say we're for fairness, and then they have a very different conception about what implementation looks like. So when you articulate your ethical standards at such an abstract level, they're impossible to operationalize. So that's one problem. The other problem revolves around calling it responsible AI. I don't really love that language. And the reason is that the ethical risks that pertain to AI get lumped into other kinds of risks. So when you talk about responsible AI, people will put into that bucket AI ethics, but also regulatory compliance, cybersecurity standards, engineering accuracy or model robustness, something like that. And then they get to work on scoring well on that program. And they score well on the program because they do the stuff they already know how to do: cybersecurity, regulatory compliance, engineering, greatness. And the ethics stuff gets short shrift. So I think one of the things that a lot of companies do is they translate AI ethics or AI ethical risks to responsible AI, throw a bunch of things into that bucket, and then give the ethical risks really short shrift. Because they don't really know what to do with it, because it's squishy subject. They think it's squishy subjective, and they don't know how to operationalize it.
We're about to get the hook here. So for our Grand Slam walk-off, one fun thing. So James and David, I'm going to ask you to give a fun thing about the other, or what's something you've learned about life or AI from the other?
All right, I'm going to say something that's going to upset David, is he's a rock star and has done everything he can to scrub the internet of the fact that he sold 40,000 albums. And it's really wonderful to see how music goes into AI. And I think in everything that he's been producing at Iris is thinking about what is actually a beautiful harmonic experience, and how can AI support humans in a beautiful way, in the same way that his music did. So I'm now in trouble.
A plus. That's a very good one.
I've learned a lot from Jim. Obviously, a great mentor through the process, and when we decided to start the company together, it was obvious how we needed to structure things and do this together. Jim, having a philosopher of sorts coordinating with a technology like this is significant. AI is not, I mean, we don't, we were talking with our director of communications, and she was like, it's not like you guys make like pencils. Like we make really significant technology. And there needs to be a tremendous amount of thoughtfulness in everything we produce. And Jim has brought a great humanity perspective to my work, to think about how we view our technology and what the actual end result impact is. And that's invaluable for everything we've produced so far.
Those are both fantastic, personal, thoughtful answers. And now Reed is going to drop the mic. I have been at this for a while. This is the first time I have ever had the privilege of interviewing a flying trapeze instructor.
A former. Then I had kids, and they ruined everything. Yeah, I mean, what do you want me to say? Yes, it's true.
How did you get into it? Do you fly? You gotta tell us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've always been into that kind of activity, any sort of quasi-extreme.
That kind of activity. That's kind of a
any
thing
kind of
its own.
flying through the air, skydiving, bungee jumping,
Okay.
Anything that seems dangerous, at least. Someone got me a gift certificate to take a lesson to fly. It's a 2-hour class, whatever, just a beginner's thing, and I took it, and I thought that was super fun. I should do another one, so I took one more. And at the end of that class, one of the instructors said, "Hey, would you like to train and be a flying trapeze catcher instructor?" And I said, "Well, I'm a professor, but I can do it in the summer." And so that Christmas break, this was something like November, that Christmas break, over the 5-week break, I trained a bunch. By the end of the 5 weeks, I met all their criteria for being a trapeze catcher. That summer, I did a bunch of catching. I worked at the school. It was phenomenally fun. And the other great thing about it is that a class is 2 hours long. Only the last half hour is catching. The first hour and a half is teaching students how to fly. So they had to teach me how to fly too. So 3 days a week I would catch. 3 days a week I'd go to flying training by people who have, been in the circus, have been to or are on their way to Cirque du Soleil. And so I was training to be a flyer. So I got to do, and I did that for, 3-4 years or so. So tremendous fun.
And physical strength, coordination, guts, like what goes into being a successful flyer?
Being short helps. You can rotate a lot faster that way. Have to be aware of your body. I've learned that a lot of people don't know where their hips are. You tell students, all right, push your hips forward, and they sort of lean forward, and you think, you don't know where your hips are. So knowing where your hips are helps. Being able to tighten your whole body, being aware of where all the bits of your body are while you're, upside down. It takes a lot of body awareness and body control.
Can you teach me to golf?
Golf? No, nothing with balls. I can, bungee jumping, skydiving, hang gliding, scuba diving, catching, throwing, forget it, I'm out.
Thank Lex and Chris. Thank Edelman Smithfield for this amazing opportunity. Thank our guests around the world for joining this, making this possible. Amazing conversations up here. Jim, David, Reed, thanks for great conversations.
My pleasure.
Great.